Welcome everybody to the 2022 West Midlands National Park International Lecture from the West Midlands National Park Lab, Birmingham School of Architecture, Design and Media and Computing, Engineering and Built Environment. I'd really like to welcome Kongjian Yu, our keynote speaker today, to Birmingham City University. Kongjian Yu is a founder of the Peking University College of Architecture and Landscape and a founder and principal designer of Turenscape, which has been applauded as one of the most innovative architectural companies in 2021 for balancing China's hyperspeed urbanization with green sponge ideas. He's also a winner of the 2020 Sir Geoffrey Jellicoe Award. So without further ado, can we hand over to Kongjian?
So Catherine, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. So my topic will be about water. Catherine just mentioned that you have a similar problem because of climate change. So you have flood, basically, and also sometimes drought. So the idea here is I call it sponge city, drought and the flood. Meanwhile, we have more problems like pollution, urban runoffs, or even agricultural pollution. But mainly for the flood control and the drought, we use the so-called gray infrastructure, stronger and increasingly more sophisticated infrastructure like damming, flood walls, channelizing river, sewage treatment system, and so on. Now, today we all understand that because of climate change, every of the gray infrastructure is going to fail. They have failed already. You can see New Orleans, you can see Zhengzhou, you can see German. They all fail. I mean, that's the reason we have to think about what's the alternative. So the gray infrastructure not only is they cannot adapt to this climate change situation because they was adopted from those early industrial technologies, early urbanism developed in European countries, whereas the climate was quite mild. Now, because of climate change, so all this infrastructure we build upon this mild climate failed. Not only that, the gray infrastructure consume huge amount of energy and materials, concrete and so on. So they actually worsen the climate itself and destroys the nature's resiliency because it cut off the natural system, and they also cut off the connection between man and nature. So the alternative we're talking about is nature-based ecological infrastructure, or people will say nature-based infrastructure, which is critical for securing ecosystem services, free services. And this infrastructure, nature-based infrastructure, certainly can woven together with gray infrastructure. And water is a key for such ecological infrastructure. So a city built on water-centered ecological infrastructure is called a sponge city. Its philosophy is to retain water at the source, slow down water flow, and be adaptive to water at the sink, which are totally opposite to the conventional solution of gray infrastructure. As you know, the conventional solution is to accumulate the water, like build a big reservoir, use big dams, and speed up the water flow, like channelizing the river, and also build a high flood wall, fight against water at the sink. So a totally opposite philosophy. Now the sponge cities are inspired by the ancient wisdom of farming and water management that use very simple tool to transform the global surface at a fast scale in a sustainable way, and particularly in monsoon climate. Here is a picture I took about 20 years ago. You can see at the background is terraces built about 2,000 meters above sea level on the slope to catch water and grow rice. This is a kind of wisdom to adaptation to climate. And the climate change is nothing new for the monsoon region. So these techniques, such as terracing the slope, pounding the ground, diking and ponding at the river delta area, and even islanding. Build islands over the water in order to make the habitat for cultivation and for living. So in the past 20 years, we have tested and upgraded those very ancient technique of farming and water management and create project to solve today's problem. And we have built over 500 projects in more than 200 cities in China and also in other parts of the world. The first is at the source, to keep the water, to retain water. So that's about stormwater regulation, absorbing excess water in the city itself. In China, over 65% of cities are suffering urban inundation. So here is an example in monsoon climate in China's Hainan Island. It was heavily flooded in the center of the city, and we just use very simple tools, cut and fill, create terrace, pond, islands in the middle of the city, and turn this landscape into a huge sponge, which is about 100 hectares in size, and at the same time create habitat for biodiversity, for birds to cover the habitat for biodiversity here, and also create a vertical boardwalk system, skywalk system, allow people to use the space at the same time. So here's just a rendering, and it is just built in 2 years, totally built in 2 years. That was beginning, and that 2 years later, you can see how this used to be very now turned into a beautiful sponge. We call it sponge that retain water in the monsoon season, but it also become a park during the year round, and also habitat for birds. The vertical layers of boardwalk and skywalk and platforms become a beautiful habitat for people to use. And underneath, you'll get all kinds of species, biodiversity, birds. This was a comparison between before and after 2015, and the lower image is just today. You can see 4 or 5 years later, a dramatic change. And also you can see how we are able to solve the problem of urban inundation in just 5 years. And this project also become a catalyst for urban development. This swampy area now become really a very high-end housing area. So property value increased 300% in just 3 years, 300%. So solves all kind of problem at the same time, create value for this land. Similarly, solves the problem in the center of the city. This is a case we take a different way. This mainly use island solution in Nanchang city in China's, also in the Yangtze River reach, in Yangtze River area. It was ash dump, a former ash dump, really brownfield, you can see here. So we create islands, thousands, hundreds of islands, and allow trees to grow in the water, but at the same time solve the problem of monsoon flood. This is when the monsoon, during the monsoon season, the whole area can be flooded, and this is when the dry season, now the area will become a park. Because the monsoon season is only a couple of weeks, or even couple of days. So you really have to make this place resilient, be adapted, able to adapt this very dramatic changing climate. This during the fall, the dry season, as during the summer, you'll see. Now it is really one of the most beloved park in the whole region. That's just built 2 years after it's been executed. Now look at how many people can use it, and also it changes the people's reaction to people's connection to the nature. The messy nature become beautiful. It's a new aesthetics. So it's a resilient, at the same time it is a very useful urban public space. We just finished another project in Thailand. Thailand is one of the most vulnerable cities in the world to the climate change, because the average elevation only about a meter, the whole city. So you have to find a solution for such kind of vulnerable city. This piece of the brownfield, it is a tobacco factory in the middle of the city, Bangkok, the capital city. And we just simple solution to transform the brownfield. Just cut and fill, create enough space to handle the storm in an area about 10 times as much of the park itself. So cut and fill, create islands, and and just a year later, you'll see how this place become a beautiful central park for people to use. At the same time, it is a resilient park. It is a resilient sponge, and it is a habitat for birds. There are many hundreds of birds coming back to the city in the middle of the city, and people certainly so love it. So people love it. So flood is another issue. Urban inundation is caused from the city itself, but now we have to talk about the regional scale about the flood. The flood solution here is to slow down the flood. Instead of drain away the flood, we say that we can make the flow slow down, so that you have enough time, allow water to interact with the species, with dirt, with the earth, and be able to recharge the aquifer. In China, all urban rivers has been channelized like that. Use concrete, use huge flood wall to protect the city from being flooded. Now, this was my first project dealing with this kind of engineering 20 years ago in China's east coast city, Taizhou, suffering monsoon flood every year. And so the engineer built such kind of wall, just channelizing the river, use concrete, and they feel safe, of course, but certainly it destroys the whole living system. And the farmers complain because the buffalo have no place to drink water. So that's why the mayor called me up and see if we have alternative. So the alternative is green infrastructure, a sponge. So we didn't actually take more space. We just simply transform the gray infrastructure into green, into sponge, into resilient, floodable river embankment, and allow people to access it. Meanwhile, cleans up the river itself because of the bioswale system. Another huge project is this flood wall. That's in my hometown in Zhejiang province, also in the monsoon region. The precipitation, it can be very heavy. Can be about 500 millimeter pouring down in just one day. So conventional solution is build higher and higher flood wall, but it never saves the city from being flooded actually. So alternative actually is to remove this concrete flood wall, terracing the riverbank, allow water to come into the city so that you will have more space for water and the city actually become more safe, more resilient. So that's a huge flood, 100-year flood, historical flood. You can see the city is still safe, but at the same time, you will see we retain the water, slow down the water. Even if it's only just one section of the river, we have the scenario, we calculated as a volume, how much the water can be retained in such a park. About 1 million cubic meter water can be retained in such a green space. If we do the whole river like that, we can virtually reduce 50% of the peak flow. So imagine the green, how can we transform this industrialized river into nature-based green infrastructure? So that's 20-year flood. At the end, when water meets the ocean, now we are talking about the sea level rising. That becomes the most serious problem, of course. But does that mean we have to build a higher and higher flood wall? Maybe not. maybe not necessary, or even maybe more dangerous. Now here is an experiment in China's Sanya city in Hainan Island. It's the only tropical city in China actually suffering this monsoon and at the same time sea level rising. The city makes this wall under construction, and we successfully convinced the city to abandon this plan. You see, it's already under construction, and we remove the concrete wall. And instead of building the wall, we actually let the seawater, let the salty water go into the land and let the seawater, salty water meet with the fresh water from above, so that we can create a habitat, an ideal habitat, which is a blackish water, allow mangrove to grow, to get established faster. This interfinger pattern, so allow the habitat to be saved from the sea surge, the ocean tide, so it can get established quickly in just a couple of years. This is 3 years after it was built. You can see a beautiful park can be built from this used to be a garbage dump, urban debris. Here, you will see what is today. Now we have another even bigger test, also in Hainan Island, to restore the sponge coast. Here's the 3 images on your right hand, lower right. We investigated that how the seawall actually destroys the natural landscape, because you build a seawall, you cut the water relationship from the ocean and the land. Meanwhile, you create a problem of salinization. The salty water will deposit in this area, so the soil become too salty for plants to grow. And in other cases, when the ocean have a huge tide, actually it causes erosion, erosion at the ground, at the base of the flood wall. So this is also the problem of building concrete flood wall. Now our solution is to remove the flood wall, but certainly we create another safe flood wall, the terracing the river, terracing the seawall, and let the water at both sides can interact, so that the salty water can go back to the ocean when the monsoon rain wash away the salt. So you create a habitat for the native species to get established. So this is a rendering, and it is built. You will see how it is built today. It's just 2 years. So we actually totally remove the high sea flood wall, seawall, and recover the habitat, and create a spongy, sponges that catch the rainfall, the storm, and let it wash away the salt, and so that this plant community can get established. And certainly it is become a public beach, public space for people to enjoy the landscape. This is today, and it takes just 2 years. You can see. So I'm talking about not just about a piece of park or a piece of green space. I'm talking about the healing the whole infrastructure from gray into green. Here is the whole river. It is about 26 kilometers in length. The whole river system runs through the city called Haikou City. It is the master river of the city. It's a whole drainage system. Again, originally people believing in this great infrastructure. The building higher and higher flood wall, and even paves the ground, it paves the riverbed, and keep dragging the river in order to make it clean. So, but for 20 years, never get this problem solved. So we take different way, and we convince the city mayor, to the government, to remove concrete. You can imagine to take off the flood wall and recycle the concrete and create terracing the riverbed, and use the constructed wetland. to catch the urban runoff and filtrate, become a filtrator to remove the nutrients from the urban runoff and create a beautiful, resilient, spongy, green sponge river bank. So that allow to solve the problem of urban flood, urban inundation. Meanwhile, we remove all the pollutants. 85% of the nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus can be removed by this terraced riverbank, and it recycles the concrete and create this spongy islands so that you can become a buffer, and also certainly recovers the habitat in the center of the city. So from XLLMS, from large, X large, small, medium, all size, we are talking about the creation of a holistic infrastructure from the major river system to also tributary and also catch water from upstream. So this is a whole system, an infrastructure. You create a sponge ground. And not only just the regional scale, I'm talking about also the national scale. This is our study about the whole, we should transform the, change the mentality, how to build our national landscape like that, instead of channelizing, drain away the flood, monsoon flood, or the whatever the precipitation from upstream. We should retain those water, because after all, the whole globe is in shortage of water. So keep the water on site as much as possible, instead of use concrete and use pipe system to drain away. This is our national vision. How can the whole nation become a sponge-like? Now, this is a real action to be executed at the, can be done at the regional scale. This is for Guangzhou city. Regional scale about 7,000 square kilometers in size. We propose this retaining water at the source, slow down the water at the flow, during the flow, to naturalize the river system and recover source pond system, and also at the end to make the city to be adaptive to the sea level rise. And this is a rendering for a new city. It's about 10 square kilometers in size. So we build in some sponge system. And that's the rendering how this sponge, green sponge go into the city, and this was built. You can see it is a sponge-like, and this is during the that was monsoon season, and this was dry season. So it is really regulating the storm water, meanwhile creating a habitat for biodiversity and a beautiful recreational park for the urban resident, for the people. People even love this park. And you don't have to irrigate this whole green space as most of the park did in China today. So more than ever, we have to rethink the way we build our cities and the way we treat water and nature, and even the way we define civilization. We used to define civilization depending on how much concrete, how much steel, and how much technology we use to define how civilized our city is. But now we say nature can be an infrastructure that provide free services. These free services including the regulation of stormwater, including providing a habitat for biodiversity, and certainly including the cultural and spiritual and beauty and so on. So it's a holistic solution. So go beyond the regional thinking and the national thinking. I'm thinking a global actually. This whole globe should be function as a sponge. Yesterday we were talking about Amazon. Amazon is a big sponge. Now it is so totally about the recovery of our planet. Well, today our politicians are negotiating for a carbon neutral globe in the UN climate conference in Egypt. We really have to have a big picture, to think like a king. Here is a king, the legendary king of Yu. King Yu is great in China. He's the first king in China actually being elected because he knows how to plan the landscape. He knows how to deal with water, because China always suffering a water problem. So he had this vision of healing the earth and living with nature. Not only that, we really have to act. We really have to be able to act like a peasant. That don't have to be really high tech. It's only very simple tool. Just cut and fill, just deal with the land down to earth and transform the whole global surface, like these people doing, like our ancestor did, make our globe more healthy, and also solve the problem holistically. So that's my quick presentation. Thank you so much again. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Kongjian. I really like that idea of thinking like a king and acting as a peasant. I think that's something we can all learn from. As ever, it's inspiring to hear about your developing vision for landscape, water and sponge cities, and to really understand how we need to rethink the design and the redesign of our cities, even in the most urban situation. It's really interesting from a hydrological and a landscape perspective. Clearly, business as usual isn't going to work, is it? The habits of recent years that have got us into this problem. It's tremendous to see also over the years how the implementation of your work is really gathering momentum in China and across the world, and to see your global vision, which would be fantastic. And I think also the thing that's important is that how you are continually monitoring the effectiveness of these projects so that we can understand the benefit that it brings to local communities in many respects, because that's something that we can really learn about. An approach that is becoming increasingly important given the accelerating climate emergency. It's a new mentality, a paradigm shift that resonates really with what we're trying to achieve here in the West Midlands. So thank you so much for your presentation. Do we have some questions for Kongjian?
Yes, I'm happy to, yeah.
Okay,
sure.
Thank you.
So, yeah, a question from Doug Jackson. Please, could you say something about how these kinds of projects are procured? So how is land acquired and the project paid for in China? And how that compares to countries with different political systems, such as the UK?
Yeah, I understand that. Well, in China, certainly all the land are public, but still we have the problem of similar problem of land acquisition. But certainly all land belong to the public. So which means if you plan well, the land can be, if the municipal government get approved, the land can be used for this kind of green infrastructure. It sounds much easier compared to in your system, or in most of the systems in those countries, like in America, in Mexico, even in India, maybe. But even in your country, or even in those very democratic or private ownership countries, I can still see that it is possible. For example, this kind of project usually can create benefit, economical benefit. It can increase property value. So property value, can be practiced in the free market system. I was in Mexico 2 years ago. I was invited to talk about the similar solution, how to deal with the Mexico problem. It's really a big problem. It's a similar problem. The river is narrow down. The river is very narrow, and you get a flood, you get a pollution. But when you look at the property along the river, they usually very poor property. They not value use. They didn't make use of the value of the water. Similar is in Thailand. I was in Thailand also, the same problem. Usually the river canal, the canal is polluted, and usually the property value is low at both sides of the river. So if you think about this is a great opportunity for developer, or even some government foundation to do it. You can actually make money, right? You can do a holistic based on systematic planning, acquire the land, and acquire the land very cheap. And when you develop, you double or you triple the land value. I have to say that in China, similar in other parts of the world, if you can transform this kind of polluted, flood urban inundation, flooded area, usually occupied by poor people, you can dramatically increase the property value. So that's a different way, right? In China, you have this top-down system, but in the free market system, I would say you can still use the market as a tool, right? Just to make use of the land, increase land property value. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's another question from Dimitri Thirachari, who is asking if you have any new innovative solutions in a small scale, like the living wall that you developed in the Hutan Park in Shanghai. Do you use approaches like amphibian tunnels or other biodiversity connectors, or ways to clean the water through walls or other systems, local systems?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, you obviously you have studied some of project. Yes, I actually, we just won a project for the Hoqing Award. It's in Shenzhen. Because it's too narrow, you know, the channel too narrow, we actually use a vertical wall. So vertical concrete wall to transform it into a water cleansing system. Because any water comes, so eluting, I mean, the water flow from the sewage treatment is not good enough for the surface water, for the habitat. So you can actually create this kind of living wall to clean it, to clean up. I think that will be another solution for this small scale project. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a question from Richard Robinson, which is a short question. I suspect it needs a very long answer. He's asking, what strategies would you suggest using in areas where large amounts of land are not as available? In highly developed, highly populated areas where private ownership creates a confusing matrix of ownership. Every
land is valuable in terms of management of water. Virtually, you can use any piece of land for managing water, right? So I'm talking not just about urban sponge, city sponge or sponge city. I'm talking also about farming, you know, farm sponge. Back 2,000 years ago, the Chinese farmers know how to create a sponge farm. There's a saying that if you cultivate 4 hectares of land, you need to give 1 hectare of land to the water, which means 20% of the land should be given to water. But that doesn't mean you will waste the water, waste the land actually. But you know, the global wise, wetland is the most productive habitat. Wetland. So water is the most productive habitat. Actually, that's why don't you manage the water when even in the farm, in the private farm? Even if you can build this called a national park, offers a private landscape, why cannot just create a guidance, you know, a guidance or a rule or a principle to say that we need to manage water at your farm, in your farm? Individualized or democratic. That's a democratic solution to manage your own water. Individual families should contain your own water. That's traditionally the monsoon region should do it. I mean, we used to do it. And also even in the city, very densely populated city, you have a roof, you have vertical walls, you have a community garden, and I mean, even in the build, it's nothing waste. So land is still there. You know, it's still it's the amount of collectible area is still there. It is still there. Yeah, I don't think because it's an open land you can create a sponge. You can create a sponge on your rooftop. I did it. I did it in my own balcony. I create a miniature sponge and also in the living wall. You know. So it is not a problem. It is just a mentality. It just technique wise, it is not so difficult. It just have to change the mind. Yeah. Yes.
How do you see the world? The world is clearly changing, and the climate crisis is becoming more obvious to most people. If we were having this conversation in 5 years' time from now, how would you hope it would be different, or what would have changed?
5 years from now, I will say more and more countries are suffering from drought and flood. People have to become, more crisis. Human being is a species based on crisis. We evolve based on crisis. When the forest disappear, we have to go down to the forest, go down to the savannah and survive. That's why I think we need a crisis to get all this idea executed, implemented. So 5 years from now, I think everyone will talk about sponge city. Everyone will you have to solve the problem. What about the South Africa, Cape Town, have no water. Why no water? Because we drain away, and we should keep water. That's simple. And in European countries like German, like Dutch, like your own country in England, you used to have very mild paradise kind of climate, very mild climate compared to where I live. My monsoon climate is dramatic climate change, right? We have very wet season, we have dry season. That's why we develop this kind of very adaptive solution. In the Yellow River Basin, the Chinese city are built upon to get 60% of the land is used for adaptation to the flood. So that's I think that's the solution based on the crisis, adaptation to nature. So climate change, I don't think so much negotiation will work. We really have to be individualized. Every family, every country itself have to make it happen on their piece of land. We don't have to. We need a big picture, but we have to really think globally and act locally. Because climate change affect locally. It's a fact. They are being affected globally, but they affect locally. So adaptation must be locally developed, must be locally to solve their own problem. That's why my thinking, yeah.
Perfect, thank you very much. So a question from Abu Siddiqui in Bangladesh. He's asking, the whole process is very expensive. I'm thinking in terms of our village in Bangladesh, where the river has been diverted, causing shortage in water supply and other climate-related issues. What would your advice be to start something at a small and affordable scale?
No, I think my solution is affordable. As I told you, we build a area here. We build a Thailand project very cheap, only $20 per square meter, very cheap compared to all kind of parks, because we are based on the farming technique. Bangladesh, I visited Bangladesh a couple years ago, and we are talking about Bangladesh actually. You used to have very sustainable solution, the pond and dike system in Bangladesh, but you simply destroy it. You copy the Dutch system, pipe system. You just dump the European urbanism system into the monsoon climate. That's why the Dhaka fail. That's why the water you get a pollution, you get a flood, simply because you abandon your own tradition. I will say you have wonderful tradition. You have very productive pond, you have very productive dike system, and even the villages, they live on the dike system. You don't have to build a pave over to build up such a big city. You can just have another typology of urbanism, I would say. Don't have to be expensive. Our infrastructure, our great infrastructure is very expensive compared to the nature-based infrastructure, which we call landscape, Yes.
So it could be big and beautiful or small and simple. Either is good.
I totally agree. You imagine when you travel in Indonesia, Malaysia, and in China, in Southeast China part, you will see that the whole global surface has been transformed, right? Or even you travel in Mexico, in South America, The whole landscape is terraced. You can imagine, no, that's for production. So we don't have to do for nothing. We are producing something. So that's not about expenses. It's about production. It's about, so it's about survival, right? Yeah. Compared to the very expensive that also cause a problem of climate change, we can just simply use very cheap, inexpensive, non-expensive, but a sustainable solution, productive way. That's why I make a green solution different from the gray solution.
Kongjian, can you tell us what you've described about as a new mentality, this new paradigm that you've been accelerating in China? What was the most effective argument? What started you off on this journey? And what was the most effective argument you had for the first projects that explored this?
Was the most powerful argument? I will say you tell them the gray infrastructure fail. Now
it doesn't work. Yeah.
Well, that's why the Chinese political leadership accepts this idea. Simply 2012, the capital got flooded. Beijing got flooded. 79 people get drowned on the street, in the car, and in the tunnel. No, that's the reality. That's happened. That's happened, and continue to happen. So that's very. And you tell them that we can not only solve the problem, but also make it beautiful and less expensive. So at that time, people's engineers still talking about build big tunnels, use concrete, but that cost billions of dollars. You cannot solve the problem. Meanwhile, you destroy the natural system. So that's why, because the great infrastructure fail, I think that's an opportunity for us to convince them that we have alternative. At the same time, we need to build something as demonstration and beautifully. I think that's why landscape architecture becomes so important. We are not just build something, but we build something artfully, beautifully, and have multiple surfaces.
Oh yes, we've got a question, Nick.
Who pays for the maintenance, and who does the maintenance of the parks when they're finished?
That's a very good question. In China, we have the department. Every municipal government has a department called landscaping or whatever, landscape management. But you do have raised a very serious question. That is, we need a different way of managing our productive landscape. Instead of managing an ornamental park, lawn like Versailles or Chinese classical garden, you really have to learn from farmers how they manage their farm. It is a productive way. You need to manage the wetland, but you harvest it. You don't just prune it. You just don't throw away the biomass. You actually need to recycle or harvest those biomass. And also you need to really, my landscape usually very minimal maintenance, because you use water, you don't have to irrigate, you collect water, and its abundance. You don't want to be very selective about species. You actually let nature take over. It's very messy. You can see all our project is very messy, very native, very productive. We have this project in Thailand that really you can look at it. It's messy, I will say, but because of the messiness, it creates all kind of diversity. But how to make this a messy landscape at the same time beautiful? No, that's challenging. That's endlessly challenging. So it's a challenging for maintenance, yes, but not necessarily expensive, but just a new way of maintaining our landscape. And you have to have a different way of design it. You cannot just design it as a very landscape which never change. We want to design a landscape that's really dynamic. It's allowed it to evolve, to working with really a living nature. Yeah, that's my response to your question. Beautiful question, yes.
Kongjian, I think you've stunned everybody to silence. I think they're all taken aback by the scale of your vision and aspirations. And I'd like to thank you again so much for your incredible talk. It's really given us something to think about, and wish you all the luck with enabling your global vision to come to fruition, because we're all depending on you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and congratulations for the award. Thank you.